I know what it feels like when your own son uses a microphone at the wedding you paid for and turns you into the punchline in front of 500 guests. I paid for my son's wedding. He humiliated me in front of 500 people. I smiled through the pain. Then his new mother-in-law would rise from her chair, ask for the mic, and tell a truth that would leave him shaking. But that part comes later. I am Ruth Callahan. I am 65. Tonight, I sit beneath chandeliers that burn like little suns. The hall is a sea of glass and white linen, the kind of place that swallows a woman like me whole if she is not careful. I keep my back straight. I fold my hands in my lap. I close my fingers around a small silver locket that belonged to my late husband, Patrick. The metal is cool against my palm. The hinge has a soft click I know by heart. When I press it, I hear him say what he used to say before school budgets and hospital bills. Breathe, Ruth. Stand up tall. You are allowed to be here. My son, Daniel Callahan, the groom, taps the microphone. He is handsome under the lights. The tux fits. The smile is easy. Melissa Harper, my new daughter-in-law, squeezes his arm. She is luminous. I truly hope she will be happy. The band quiets. Servers stop mid-stride. 500 faces tilt toward the stage. Daniel grins. He looks like a boy who has been handed the keys to a shiny car. I want to thank my mom for everything. She really tried, he says, and people laugh before they know why. My mother has always believed a few little apartments add up to an empire. She calls them investments. We keep telling her to relax. Let the young people handle the future. But she does not listen. The laugh this time is bigger, wider. It rolls across the tables like a wave catching silverware in its drag. A groomsman slaps another on the shoulder. Someone near the bar snorts. I keep the smile I have been practicing since Daniel turned 12 and decided that gentleness means weak. I straighten my napkin. I nod along as if we are all in on it. As if this joke did not take 30 years of my life to craft. My phone lights up under the table. I turn it face down. Later, I will return that call. Later, when the music starts again, when the plates are cleared, when I can step outside and breathe night air that does not judge. For now, I sit with my hands around the locket and let the room decide what it thinks of me. There is a flavor to humiliation. For me, it is metallic, like pennies held too long in a closed fist. Daniel continues. He is warming to it now. Mom has her little side projects. She says she consults. Really, it is something to keep busy in retirement. We are just glad she gets out of the house. More laughter. Someone across the aisle lifts a glass in my direction. A pity toast. I raise my water. I keep my eyes soft. Patrick would tell me to breathe. I do. I see my older sister, Margaret, at the next table. She is telling a couple from the bride's side that I was always the quiet one, always the frugal one, always a little out of step. She says it fondly. She means no harm. The harm arrives anyway. It arrives in sideways looks and small smiles, in the way people decide where to place you in the room. Staff, clear salads. The clink of plates is bright as bells. A child in a white dress spins near my chair. Her shoes blink with tiny lights. For a moment, I let my gaze follow her, and the spinning gives me a small mercy. It blurs faces. It turns the hall into a soft watercolor. Then the spinning stops. The faces return. The microphone pops in Daniel's hand. I mean, look at her, he says. He sweeps his arm toward me like a game show host revealing a lesser prize. She insists on dressing herself. She refuses help. She is stubborn. She thinks her pennies are pearls. But we love her anyway. 500 people turn to appraise me as if they are choosing a vase in a store, as if I am something fragile and quaint that does not belong on a modern shelf. I smile. I touch the locket. I steady my breathing. Inside the locket is a picture the size of a postage stamp. Patrick holds a fishing rod. The lake behind him is the exact color of forgiveness. The hinge clicks. I close my hand. Across the room, I see a woman watching. She is elegant without trying. She sits at the family table on the bride's side. This is Evelyn Harper, Melissa's mother. We have met briefly. We have exchanged polite words about flowers and seating charts. Now her eyes move from Daniel to me, from the microphone to my hands, and something in her expression tightens the air between us. She says nothing. She simply watches. And that watching is a kind of shelter I did not know I needed. The band leader leans toward a music stand. He is ready to nudge the moment forward. Daniel is not done. Anyway, raise a glass to my mom, the woman who paid for half this party, the woman who still thinks coupons are a personality. Glasses rise, some out of kindness, some out of sport. I lift my water again. I think of 17-year-old Daniel eating the last piece of chicken and pretending he thought I was not hungry. Of 22-year-old Daniel calling me from a dorm room to ask if the rent had been sent. Of me placing a hand on an empty wallet and promising yes. The past is a faithful archivist. It keeps everything. I set my glass down. I look at my son. For a second, he catches my eye. For a second, the smile slips. For a second, I see the boy who hid his report card in the laundry and needed me to be the one who found it. Then the room laughs again. The boy disappears. The man with the microphone returns. A server brushes my elbow and whispers that the cake will be rolled soon. I nod. The chandeliers hum. I hold the locket and let its cool weight anchor me to the chair. I remind myself that this is his night, that a mother does not wrestle a microphone from her child, that dignity is a choice even when the room votes against it. If they knew the truth, but no, tonight is not my night. I was 65 when the headaches eased, not because life softened, but because I learned to breathe on command. People think breathing is automatic. Widows know better by experience. I am Ruth Callahan, a widow. Wedding band now lives on a chain. For 3 decades, I was a high school librarian, the quiet keeper of lost paperbacks and overdue slips, the woman who could find the one book a 9th grader needed 5 minutes before the bell. Patrick, my husband, was a truck mechanic with patience under his voice. He died too early. A highway curve, a tired driver, a morning that split my years into before and after. The day I emptied his toolbox, my palm closed around a silver locket in the drawer. Inside was a Booth square. His grin, my surprised eyes, proof we once believed time would wait. I strung the locket on a thin chain and promised to wear it until the hinge forgot how to work. Daniel was 9 when the casseroles stopped arriving, and the nights grew long. I took the shifts no one wanted, Saturday mornings, budget weeks, inventory days. After closing, I shelved books until lights clicked off. Then I walked to the Adult Learning Center where I filed attendance and brewed coffee for night students. When Daniel slept, I opened the desktop and typed. Invoices for a florist, intake forms for a tax preparer, minutes for a neighborhood board that preferred tidy numbers to messy fights. The locket became a habit, a worry stone I turned between errands. On parent nights, I rubbed it while I told teachers Daniel was trying. When a radiator died, I pressed it while I wrote a check with careful hands. Money was a river I learned to read. Sometimes it rose. Sometimes it stranded you in mud. You crossed anyway because the boy needed cleats and the mortgage waited for no one. By the time Daniel reached college, I could build a household budget blindfolded. At the library, I kept my voice soft. At home, I kept columns: gas, groceries, tuition, interest. I discovered I was good at patterns. A florist who over-ordered lilies. A contractor who paid every bill on a Thursday. A landlord who raised rents in April and September without fail. Small truths formed a net. If I watched closely, less slipped through. When Daniel brought home Melissa Harper, he was taller than worry. Melissa was bright and quick. She asked real questions and listened to the answers. The afternoon he introduced me to her parents, we met at a cafe with windows like open eyes. Evelyn Harper, Melissa's mother, arrived in a navy dress and a calm that looked practiced. She thanked me for raising a son who opened doors and carried boxes without being asked. I liked her steadiness. I recognized the way she took stock of a room without seeming to move. Life kept its lists. I kept mine. Even after I retired from the library, I kept typing at night. Not stories, ledgers. People said I was stubborn. I said I was careful. The locket rested against my pulse while I sorted numbers into families, expenses, income, timing. If the house was quiet enough, I could hear Patrick's old advice. Check it twice, then once again, then trust yourself. That is how a widow learns to breathe on command. You count. You hold. You release. You do it while the boy sleeps. You do it while a bill comes due. You do it while you decide which truths the world has earned the right to hear. Daniel said it first like a kindness. Later, he said it like a rule. Mom, you should rest. Stop trying to prove yourself. At my kitchen table, he would pat my hand. He would glance at the spreadsheets beside my tea and smile the way people smile at a stubborn pet. Rest, he said, and let the future belong to people who are not tired yet. I folded the papers. I wiped the crumbs. At the grocery store, he reached for my wallet before the total appeared. I have got it, he said. Then louder, so the cashier could hear, my mom still clips coupons like it is a sport, but I want her to enjoy retirement. The cashier laughed. It was not unkind. Still, my face warmed. I closed my fingers around the silver locket at my throat and nodded, as if the comment floated harmlessly over our heads. When he moved in with Melissa, my new daughter-in-law, he called to ask about electricity rates. I offered to send a comparison I kept. He sighed. Mom, it is fine. You do not have to do that thing where you make everything a project. I said I understood. I erased 2 notes on an envelope and dropped it in the trash. Margaret, my older sister, has a talent for certainty. She arrived with a lemon pie and firm sentences. Ruth, be realistic. You had your years. You raised a good son. Do not make yourself miserable trying to build a second act. She set the pie on my counter like a verdict. It is wonderful you are careful with money, but enough. Stop dreaming up a career. Enjoy your porch. Call it a life. I poured coffee. She took cream. We sat without speaking long. At church, the women from the craft circle asked about retirement. I said I was doing some consulting, small things, organizing books for a literacy nonprofit, helping a florist with invoices, reviewing schedules for a community clinic. One woman tilted her head. You are still working, dear? What for? Another said, I hope you are charging them, or at least getting free flowers. I smiled and said the clinic ran on time now. On Wednesdays, the retirees meet at the library to trade paperbacks. I brought coffee cake and mentioned a budgeting class the community center wanted to try. Volunteer if you must, a man said, but do not overdo it. You will wear yourself thin. A woman added, let the young ones teach apps. Our job is to clap politely. The table nodded. I cut the cake into smaller squares and listened to pages turn. None of this was cruel. None of it was tender. It was the tone people use when they have decided where you belong. On Saturdays, Daniel would glance at my laptop and close it with 2 fingers. Mom, you should rest. Stop trying to prove yourself. He meant well. He liked being generous when the cost was my spine. He washed the dishes and left the faucet running. He tossed the dish towel on the stove and said, see, I helped. I shut the faucet. I hung the towel to dry. Sometimes I held a defense on my tongue. I could have said that numbers are a language and I am fluent. That order is not opposed to impress anyone. I could have told Margaret that contentment without purpose is a room without a door. Instead, I pressed the locket once. I kept my voice low. I let their words pass over me like weather. Then I made a small list to finish before the kettle sang. In the mirror above the sink, the woman looking back had my mother's mouth and my own eyes. When I breathed in, the locket lifted. When I breathed out, it settled. Daniel wants me safe. Margaret wants me quiet. Friends want me sweet. I want a ledger that balances and a life that does not ask permission to be whole. So I nodded at their advice. I thanked them for caring. I washed my hands. I dried them well. I opened a blank page where the margins still belonged to me. Tuesday night, the house sounded like a library after closing. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. The streetlight drew a square on my kitchen table. I opened the laptop and the screen came alive with numbers. Cash flow charts, trailing 12-month graphs, vendor aging, a pipeline labeled Q3 acquisitions. The silver locket lay beside the trackpad, a small moon catching blue light. I read notes from compliance. I reviewed a term sheet. I marked a paragraph about contingent liabilities with a yellow comment. The phone on the table lit, vibrating once. The name on the screen said, board meeting. I let it ring. I answered on speaker. A calm voice asked if tomorrow's agenda should include the revised capital plan. I kept my voice even. Approve the new line. Hold the dividend. Move the facilities vote to the following quarter. The voice thanked me. Another joined. Legal recommended language for a non-disclosure extension. I nodded even though they could not see me. My fingers rested on the locket. I felt the hinge and found my breath. When the call ended, I stared at the screen and watched the cursor blink like a lighthouse in fog. Headlights swept the front window. Daniel's car, early. My body moved before I thought. Muscle memory forged by years of being underestimated. I closed the laptop with a soft clap. The room exhaled. I slipped the computer into the quilting cupboard behind a stack of pattern books. I placed the locket back on its chain. I wiped the table with a dish towel as if the only business here were crumbs. The phone buzzed again. Board meeting flashed and disappeared as I silenced the ringer. I pulled a casserole from the oven and slid it onto a trivet. Steam curled like handwriting over hot paper. Daniel knocked and came in, calling, "Hey, Mom, did you nap?" I smiled. I lifted plates. I asked politely about traffic. He never saw the square of light fade from the tabletop. He never noticed the faint outline of spreadsheets on my glasses. When he asked what I had been doing, I said folding laundry. Then I asked if he wanted more salt. He sat, satisfied. The cupboard door hid a black rectangle that still held our agenda. The house kept our secret, and the night returned to the sound a library makes when everyone believes it is empty. The ballroom glowed like a promise. Chandeliers washed light across polished floors. I arrived early with flats in my tote and the silver locket warm against my skin. I tied ribbons on programs, straightened escort cards, tucked safety pins into the seamstress kit. I labeled a box of candle holders and slid it beneath the gift table. I pressed the locket once. Tonight belonged to the children. Guests gathered in the lobby. The quartet slipped from Bach into a pop melody. Evelyn Harper, the bride's mother, moved with quiet purpose. She checked seating and murmured to the maitre d'. We met eyes. Her glance said we are the ones who keep the wheels oiled. Daniel, my son, and Melissa, my new daughter-in-law, appeared at the staircase. Applause rose like heat. The ceremony passed in a wash of vows and white. During photos, I fetched water and blotting papers. I fastened a clasp for a bridesmaid whose fingers shook. When the grand doors opened, the room breathed at once. The band hit a bright chord. Candles mirrored themselves. Servers flowed with champagne. I took my seat near the family table, not quite at it, close enough to clap on cue. Dinner began with toasts. Melissa's father thanked vendors and friends. He praised the planner and the venue twice. Melissa thanked her college roommates and the stylist who saved a curl. Daniel raised his glass and thanked his groomsmen and the caterer for extra sliders. He grinned. He thanked Evelyn for details and Melissa for saying yes. They did not mention me. The forgetting slid under the door and settled behind my ribs. Between courses, colleagues from Melissa's company stopped by to greet Daniel. He gestured toward me without turning. My mother. She is just keeping busy with some financial consulting, something to pass the time. Their smiles were practiced. One woman squeezed my shoulder and said retirees get restless. Her husband added that hobbies keep the mind young. I nodded and said the chicken was excellent. My water glass was full. My throat was dry. At the bar, a cousin asked if I missed the library. I said I loved the work. He joked that search engines made librarians obsolete and pointed me toward dessert. I touched the locket and said I would find it later. On the way back, a groomsman told a bridesmaid I still clip coupons like a sport. She said at least I am adorable about it. I passed with a smile that felt borrowed. Back at my seat, 2 venue staffers complimented the neat escort cards. I told them it helps to spell check twice. They asked who handled the budget. I said the families worked together. They nodded and said the Harpers clearly had an eye for detail. I lifted my water and decided not to correct them. The violinist slid into a new key. The lights softened. Conversation rose and fell like small waves on china. Evelyn paused beside me and asked if I needed anything. I said I was fine. She glanced toward the stage. The band leader lifted a hand. The next round of toasts cued. You did a beautiful job with the place cards, she said. Her voice made room for me to stand in. I thanked her. We both faced forward. 2 women in evening light who knew where the spare tape lived. When the MC asked the room to raise a glass to those who made the night possible, spotlights swept the planners and settled on the bridal table. Applause again. I clapped with everyone else. The sound seemed to belong to someone nearby. The cake waited under a small canopy, like a crowned witness. A server refilled my glass and asked if I was enjoying retirement. I said I was learning to, and he hurried away. I smoothed the linen under my fingertips while conversations braided and frayed. I felt the story the room was writing about me, tidy and light. It did not ask what I carried. I kept my posture clean, my tone warm, my secrets folded like stationery in a drawer. The chandeliers hummed. I touched the locket and counted my breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Then the band moved on. The quartet slid into a catchy melody, and guests bottled up near the bar, bright as coins in a jar. I stood at a service station, straightening napkins, when Daniel's friends tucked themselves between 2 pillars like boys under bleachers. A tall one with a glossy part lowered his voice to the kind of whisper that wants to be overheard. "She's trying investing. At her age," he said, and the circle broke into small laughter that bounced off marble and glass while their cufflinks flashed. My heart did its widow trick. 1 step to the side, wait for the floor to stop tilting. I pressed the silver locket at my throat and looked for something useful to do. A tray on the sideboard held 6 untouched flutes. Staff clogged the aisle. Table 11 had been skipped. I lifted the tray, balanced its weight, and walked toward the group, the way I carried books down a library aisle. Purposeful, quiet, invisible until a hand reached out for help. "Champagne," I said, holding the tray where the light found it. The tall friend put on a courtly grin and took a glass. "Mrs. Callahan, right," he said. "Daniel says you are into finance now. Big moves." He made big moves sound like a costume. Another friend, sunburned from a bachelor trip, wagged a finger. "Careful with the market. My aunt tried day trading and turned retirement into a field trip." Laughter again. A third added, "If you want an app for seniors, my cousin builds them." I felt the weight ease as each flute left my tray. I used the emptying silver as a shield. "Numbers have their uses," I said. The tall one winked. "Spreadsheets as a hobby. Adorable." The word adorable landed like a sticker I did not order. I kept my mouth soft and my posture useful while they compared hot tips they did not plan to follow. Their attention hopped from me to themselves with the tireless energy of sparrows. They toasted Daniel, who was across the room coaxing a vendor into extra sliders. "To the groom, to Mrs. C, who keeps busy," the tall friend said, raising his glass toward my shoulder rather than my eyes. Not cruel, not kind, just the neat version of a story choosing itself. I dipped my head and let it pass like weather that may wet your sleeves, but cannot flood your house if you keep the doors shut and towels ready. The tray emptied. I stepped back and returned to the service station. A server hustled by with a pitcher of water and mouthed thanks. Near the windows, the night pressed its face to the glass. Valets trotted between headlamps. Inside, everything gleamed and hummed. I set the tray down, wiped a ring of condensation from wood, and stacked the empties so they would not tremble. Order is a language I speak when conversation fails to grant any meaning. Their voices drifted after me, prices, tips, memes pretending to be wisdom. "She clips coupons like it is cardio," someone said. "Empire of pennies," someone else answered. The joke made tidy work of 3 decades. My chest tightened. I placed a hand flat on the counter until the ache found its seat. I have sacrificed my whole life. Now I am a punchline told between a salad and the first dance. The thought steadied rather than soured. Breath in, breath held, Breath out. Repeat. I rinsed 2 flutes at the bus stand the way you rinse a scraped knee. Check the grit, pat it dry, keep moving. A memory slid in with the running water. Daniel asleep in the back seat after a school concert. Me in the driver's seat counting tips so the light bill would clear. I shut off the faucet and put the memory back where it cannot snag the present. Then I folded a towel and set it square on the counter. Across the room, Evelyn Harper, the bride's mother, watched the same cluster with a calm that could hold a roof. Her mouth did not move. Her attention did. She spoke to the planner. Both women nodded. A small problem evaporated before it learned its own name. When Evelyn's eyes found mine, she did not offer pity. She took inventory. I recognized the look. It is the one women use when they refuse to be fooled by shine. Her small nod steadied me like a hand at the elbow. Daniel drifted in, pulled by his friends like tide. Someone retold the coupon line. He shrugged the way homework went missing. "Mom needs something to do," he said. I pressed the locket. A server asked me to carry forks to table 9. I said yes. Then I returned to my seat and arranged my napkin. Margaret arrived at my table with the stride of someone who believes her timing is perfect. She set down a small clutch and leaned in so far the centerpiece brushed her sleeve. "Ruth, celebrate Daniel for once. Let the boy shine," she said. Then she lifted her chin and let her voice carry beyond our linen circle. "Ruth, be happy. Your son is successful. As for you, stop dreaming about building anything new. Be content." I kept my hands folded, thumb rubbing the edge of the silver locket hidden under my neckline. The metal was cool, the hinge steady under my finger. Margaret smiled the way winners smile at a ceremony no one else realized was a competition. "You worked hard," she continued, still loud. "Now let life be gentle. Read. Garden. Do not chase careers at your age." A woman in a coral dress nodded and said, "Retirement is a gift you open on schedule." A man with a sailboat tie said his mother tried a late business and wore herself out in 6 months. "Enjoy the porch," he added, raising his glass toward me. Another guest said, "Hobbies keep people like us sweet." Their kindness arrived padded with foam. The package was still a cage. I lifted my water and smiled, the small party trick I had practiced during winters. "Thank you," I said. Margaret relaxed into the approving hum, pleased that her guidance had landed. She patted my hand twice, as if I were a student returning a pencil after a test. "You did your part," she said. "Now let Daniel and Melissa run. Do not make yourself ridiculous trying to keep up." I thought of rent met with rolled coins and hems stitched on the kitchen table. I kept those thoughts where they belonged, behind my teeth. The band slipped into a standard. Servers lifted domes from entrees. Margaret turned to the next table and repeated the lesson for strangers who had not asked for it. "Ruth is wonderfully thrifty," she told them. "She was always careful. Now she is restless. Families need dignity, not experiments." Nods gathered. Someone said it was nice to see sisters so close. Another said every clan needs a realist. Margaret preened at the word. I tipped my head and arranged my napkin as if alignment were a prayer. Evelyn Harper drifted by, eyes measuring without judgment. She touched shoulder and asked if I needed tea. She did not contradict Margaret or join the chorus. She simply made space for me to answer for myself. I thanked her and said water was fine. Margaret rolled her eyes at Evelyn's elegance and whispered that some people forget their place once they marry money. Daniel approached with 2 groomsmen and caught the tail of Margaret's sentence. He laughed the easy laugh he saves for crowds. "Mom has always been determined," he said, and for a heartbeat I thought he might lift me. Then he tapped my glass. "We keep telling her to enjoy life instead of making projects. Maybe after tonight she will hear us." The groomsmen chuckled. Margaret squeezed my fingers as if she had won a round. A server offered coffee. I accepted cream and sugar I did not need. The ritual gave my hands work. The locket lay warm against my skin. I pressed it once and counted silently. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The breath cleared a small space where my dignity could stand upright, even if the room asked it to kneel. Across the hall, someone called for the father-daughter dance. The crowd pivoted toward light. Conversation loosened its grip on me. Margaret gathered her clutch and told the table she was off to greet the bandleader. She kissed my cheek, powdered and firm. "Smile for the photos," she said, "and promise me you will stop chasing windmills." "I promise to choose carefully," I said. She heard surrender and glowed. The dance began. Applause, like warm rain, covered voices. I held the locket and remembered Patrick's steady hands. I straightened my spine. I let my face be kind. Under the music, a small, exact self made a single notation and closed the book. Daniel caught me between the dessert table and the terrace doors. Tuxedo jacket open, the way confidence wears itself when a room belongs to it. "Come on, Mom," he said, touching my elbow with practiced charm. "There is a group I want you to meet." I followed. The silver locket rested against my skin. I pressed it once to mark the moment. He threaded us through clusters of guests and stopped by a round near the band. 5 men and 2 women stood there. "These are my people," Daniel announced. "Team leads, clients, the ones who keep me busy." They grinned. "This is my mother," he said, angling me toward their semicircle. "She likes to call herself a financial consultant. Really, it is something to pass the time." He said it lightly. Casual is the cleanest way to lower someone. Laughter sparked, not a roar, just a neat flicker. A woman with strong brows tilted her head. "Staying sharp," she said. "My parents do Sudoku." A man with square cufflinks lifted his glass. "We need more of that spirit," he offered. "My mom volunteers at the thrift and terrorizes the pricing gun." Another added a story about an aunt who fell for a crypto ad on television. The jokes braided into a polite rope. I talked about the lighting. There was no safe place to set the truth. One of the men asked Daniel about quarterly numbers. He planted a hand on the back of my chair. "Up across the board," he said. "We own our lane." Then, like a garnish, he gestured toward me. "My mom thinks spreadsheets are a personality, so she is thrilled." Cuffs glinted. Someone snorted. The question died. A new topic bloomed. Vacations by bottled water shores. I stood inside the circle without a chair, useful as a lamp. The music leaned into brass. I tugged the locket chain to settle it and asked if anyone needed water. "No," they chorused, kindness dressed as dismissal. One woman asked where I retired from. "High school library," I said. She brightened. "So you are meticulous," she said. "A perfect editor for shopping lists." More laughter, a glancing blow that still found bone. Daniel checked his watch with a flourish. "We should let them mingle," he told me. "Do not corner anyone with budget talk, okay?" He smiled so widely the directive looked like a favor. I smiled back with the small muscle that knows how to obey. Someone touched my elbow, then forgot. The band leader announced first dances. The circle broke cleanly. I slipped down the corridor toward the restrooms. The hallway smelled of eucalyptus and lemon. Inside, mirrors waited above porcelain. I chose the last stall, latched it, and sat. Standing felt like a test I had not studied for. Tears made their case. I heard them assemble, let them argue, and ruled against them. No mascara streaks, no swollen lids in photos, no satisfaction for anyone who wished me small. I pressed the locket against my sternum until the coolness steadied my breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The Count put up a fence, feeling pawed and found no opening. A faucet hissed. 2 bridesmaids giggled about a groomsman's speech. One mimicked a coupon joke. Their laughter was silver bells. When they left, I faced the mirror. Fluorescent trim told the truth without apology. A woman looked back with my mother's mouth and my own eyes. Her spine straight, not brittle. Her jaw steady, not clenched. I wiped a corner where a tear had dared to glitter and watched it disappear like a secret that realized it was not welcome. I wanted to leave. The sentence arrived whole and sat at the head of my mind. I could slip out the service exit, call a car, be home before the cake surrendered. The couch would welcome. The dress could come off. The cut of the night would stop nicking my skin. I wanted to leave so badly the thought wrote itself on my tongue. Leaving would teach Daniel the wrong lesson. That thought rose slower and heavier, like a book lifted from a bottom shelf. If I leave, he wins the story he is telling about me. The story where I cannot stand the room my money rented. The story where jokes chase me to the curb. If I stay, I do not fix him. I fix my posture. I refuse the smallness he scripted. I washed my hands and watched water move over skin that has cleaned paintbrushes and roaster pans. I dried them carefully. I added a smile that belonged to no one else. A single breath unspooled the ache. Not gone, manageable. I tucked a stray hair, straightened my hem, tapped the locket once like a gavel. The judge in me adjourned sorrow until later, when the house would be dark and I could weep without audience. When I stepped back into the hallway, band was easing a mother into a spotlight. People clapped in the polite rhythm reserved for tradition. I walked toward my seat with unhurried feet. I would not abandon the field I paid to mow. I would sit where I was placed, smile at who I was given, and gather whatever dignity the night allowed, holding it the way you hold a book you love when others have forgotten how to read it. The band softened to a hush, and the maid of honor stood, a slim brunette with a voice trained by 1,000 brunch toasts. This was Amy, Melissa's closest friend since freshman year, the woman who planned the shower and color coded the rehearsal. She lifted her glass, winked at the head table, and told the room she would keep it brief. She did not. "First, to our radiant bride," she said, then turned the smile toward me. "And to the mother who keeps things interesting. Ruth is building an empire at retirement age. Can you believe that? She is proof that ambition does not expire. It just naps for a few decades." The laughter broke clean and loud. Forks paused in midair. Someone near the bar clapped like a metronome. Amy rode the wave. When Melissa and I were choosing linens, Ruth was choosing spreadsheets. She has side hustles stacked like napkins. She told me she consults. I told her I consult my therapist. Balance. Another cheer. She says she is diversifying assets. I say she is diversifying hobbies. We love a queen with a coupon. The room tipped toward her. It felt like watching a tide decide what to keep. I kept my chin level and let my eyes rest on the table's small centerpiece. White roses, eucalyptus, tea lights doing their best. I pressed the silver locket and noted the cool circle under my thumb. I thought of Patrick packing a lunch in a brown bag, of Daniel at 6 wearing a paper crown that said King of the Reading Corner. The noise churned and lifted. I breathed to the count I trust. Amy went for the finish. Here's to Ruth, our venture capitalist of vibes, still pitching at 65, still closing on BOGO. May your empire be sturdy and your apps have large fonts. The punchline landed. Even the band laughed. The sound did not feel cruel. It felt careless, which is a kind of cruelty that pretends to be fun. I bowed my head a fraction and let the moment pass over me. Heat gathered under my collarbone and settled. The humiliation had climbed all the rungs it needed. I kept my seat. I kept my breath. The room kept laughing. The night had not broken me. It had simply announced how near the breaking point now stood. I did not move. Daniel reached for the microphone again, buoyed by the laughter Amy had harvested. Before he could speak, Evelyn Harper stood from the family table with the grace of a judge rising. She did not ask. She simply extended a hand, and Daniel, startled, surrendered the mic without a quarrel. Her navy sleeve caught the chandelier light, her voice carried without strain. "Daniel," she said, facing my son first, "you do not know who your mother is." The room stopped the way a tide stops at a wall. Forks hovered, glasses paused mid-air. The bandleader blinked at his chart and waited. Silence found its chair. 500 guests watched a woman who had practiced authority learn how to use it kindly. Evelyn did not look at me. She looked at the room, then back to the man who had just performed a neat public shrinking of his mother. "I am sorry to interrupt," she said, "but a correction is owed. We have been laughing at a story that is not true." A server froze with a tray of coffee cups. Somewhere near the doors, a child's shoe light blinked and stilled. Evelyn turned a fraction, so the whole hall could read her mouth. "Ruth Callahan is not a hobbyist," she said. "She is the founder and managing partner of RC Holdings, a private investment firm that operates quietly, prefers facts to fanfare, and currently oversees a portfolio approaching $100 million. She does not pass time. She allocates capital. She fixes broken systems. She writes plans that keep people employed." She let that land. The chandeliers hummed like patient witnesses. I held the silver locket and felt the hinge answer my pulse with a steady click. A ripple moved through the tables. Not scandal, comprehension. People who had smiled at me with pity recalculated their math. You could see it in their posture. Amy put her glass down too quickly and winced when the rim kissed china. Daniel's mouth opened and did not settle on a shape. I kept breathing to account. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Evelyn's eyes traveled the room as if collecting loose apologies and setting them on a tray where they could be served later. She continued, voice level. "Last year, through a subsidiary, RC Holdings acquired Harper Logistics, my family's company. The terms were confidential. The work was not. When lenders grew impatient, when fuel prices complicated routes, the plans that steadied us came from Ruth's desk. That means, Daniel, when you thanked me for details tonight, you overlooked the woman whose capital kept our trucks on the road. You overlooked the person you just reduced to a joke about coupons. She did not spit the words. She plated them, hot and exact. If shame makes a sound, it is the soft collapse of certainty. I watched it move across my son's face, the same face that once slept open-mouthed in car seats. Melissa gripped the back of his chair and looked at me as if she had walked through a familiar door and found a harbor where she expected a closet. Evelyn rested one hand on the lectern. "I did not intend to speak," she said, "but I owed Ruth truth in public because her restraint protected my family in private. You deserve to know who sits among you." Someone near the bar whispered my name as if testing the weight of it. A man who had told a thrift store joke studied his napkin as if it could teach him civility. Servers stood still, silver unmoving on their hands. I did not shift. The locket warmed against my skin. Patrick's photograph pressed a calm, the way a hand steadies the back of a chair before someone stands. Evelyn glanced at me then, not asking permission, but honoring it. "If she had wanted attention," she said, "you would have known, long before tonight. She prefers the work to the bow." She turned back to Daniel. "You owe your mother more than a toast that mistakes generosity for vanity. You owe her respect, not because she manages money, because she showed you how to build something without asking the loudest person for permission." A murmur gathered, then stalled, as if uncertain which direction decency travels once it has been asleep. Daniel tried on a smile and discarded it. He reached for the mic he had surrendered, then stopped, hands empty. Evelyn inclined her head toward me. "Ruth," she said, "you do not need to speak. I only needed the room to stop pretending it knows you." I stood without standing, which is to say I kept my seat and allowed my spine to do the work. The hinge of the locket clicked once. Silence held, generous and exact. The truth had been set in the center of the table. It did not require garnish. The sound after Evelyn's words moved through the ballroom like wind crossing wheat. A hush, then stillness. Conversations tried to restart and failed. I heard my name carried table to table in question marks. Ruth, Callahan, RC Holdings. The chandeliers kept humming. Near the doors, the valets paused with claim tickets held like flags at half-mast. Two servers exchanged a look that said they had heard stories like this from kitchens, never from microphones. The photographer lowered her camera and let the strap catch on her wrist. An older aunt crossed herself out of habit and then laughed at her own reflex. The planner mouthed "breathe" toward me from 30 feet away. Even the ice and water pitchers clicked, tiny acknowledgments that the room had changed shape. At the bar, the man who joked about thrift stores stared into his glass until the ice softened. Amy, the maid of honor, folded her note cards into a small, guilty square. The groomsman who loved the coupon line found his napkin suddenly scholarly. Their laughter had been the weather. Now it looked like a forecast written by children. I did not stand. I set my wineglass down and let the stem find the linen with a patient click. A server froze mid-pour. Power does not always arrive with volume. Sometimes it is the neat placement of a glass, the refusal to color a silence that has learned its size. The silver locket warmed under my collarbone. Daniel did not move at first. My son looked like a man who stepped off a curb and discovered the street was a river. Color slid out of his face. His mouth tried shapes and kept none. Melissa, my new daughter-in-law, gripped the back of his chair. A tremor traveled from wrist to fingertip. She glanced at me with an apology that did not yet know its words, then at her mother, Then back to Daniel. A client at Daniel's table cleared his throat and began a story about quarterly targets, then abandoned it mid-sentence. Someone said 100 million in the tone people reserve for oceans. The planner lifted a hand toward the band. The band leader kept the baton down. Margaret reached my shoulder with a smile that mistook itself for rescue and fell apart when it touched ground. "Ruth," she said, and made the first syllable a question. She had held her certainty like a parasol. The wind took it. She straightened the edge of my napkin because hands like to help when ideas cannot defend themselves. "You should have told me," she whispered. Around us, men who rehearsed importance reconsidered the hobby of it. 2 executives from a tenant company sat straighter. One reached for his phone, then let it go. A woman I had once helped with forms covered her mouth and blinked. Dignity, once named aloud, travels quickly. Evelyn set the microphone on the lectern and let her hands fall to her sides. She did not touch me. She did not need to. Restraint can be a bridge. For years, I let the math speak only to me. Tonight, the math had a public voice. Daniel finally found a sound. "Mom," he said, but only that. The second word hid behind it. Melissa leaned nearer, pressing 2 fingers into his shoulder, the pattern of someone who knows panic and still believes in breath. He tried on a smile and discarded it. I did not rescue them. I placed my palms flat on either side of my plate and breathed to a count I could trust. In that stillness, the room corrected its math. People who had decided I was quaint repositioned me in their stories. A man at the next table lifted his glass toward me and lowered it. Another took 2 steps my way and stopped when he reached a memory of a joke made minutes before. A server remembered motion and poured coffee. The scent traveled between tables like a permission slip. Silver regained its purpose. Amy stole a glance my way, the look of a student who understands the lesson after the bell. I gave her a small nod. Daniel rubbed his forehead as if erasing a caption printed under a photograph. Melissa whispered close to his ear, and he shook his head, the semaphore of a man who cannot yet read the new map. His eyes found mine. For a heartbeat, we were in a high school parking lot after a concert. Then, the present closed over the memory, like clear water. Voices resumed in lower keys. Respect makes a different sound than flattery. Quieter, heavier, truer. I tested its weight and found it serviceable. I lifted the wine glass again, not to drink, but to place it down once more with intention, as if to mark that the chapter had changed and that apologies would not turn the page by themselves. I kept my seat. I kept my breath. The reversal had arrived without my reaching for it, and I honored the gift by not touching it more than needed. A terrace door opened and a square of night air entered. I let it find me. I let it pass. I waited while the room learned a language I could allow inside, a language that does not shrink mothers to punchlines, a language that understood the difference between keeping busy and building. Evelyn lifted the microphone again and finished what she had begun. Her voice didn't rise. It settled over the tables. Half the people in this room are working, directly or indirectly, for Mrs. Callahan's fund, she said. And you've been laughing at the person who signs the checks that keep your lights on. The ballroom inhaled. No applause, no outrage, only a hush. A woman who had joked about apps pressed her napkin to her lip, as if to stop more careless words from escaping. Evelyn didn't press the point. "You weren't cruel on purpose," she said. But you were careless with a woman's work, and careless is a kind of cruelty. She set the microphone on the lectern with a small click and stepped back. No fanfare, just air learning its proper shape. Whispers changed grammar. I heard my name spoken carefully. Ruth, Miss Callahan. Ma'am. I wrapped my fingers around the stem of my glass and set it down again, a measured act, as if to mark the line between before and after. At table 6, 2 managers from Harper Logistics exchanged a look that contained a month of memos. A vendor from a regional carrier straightened his tie and mouthed an apology he was not brave enough to deliver. A junior accountant counted silently on her fingers, assembling our subsidiaries like beads on a string. Daniel found breath the way a diver breaks surface. He stood, then sat, then stood again. "Mom," he said, the word blown hollow, "why didn't you tell me?" Melissa kept one hand on his shoulder, steadying him as if the floor had tilted. "Because every time I tried, you laughed was already written inside my mouth." I turned and met my son's eyes. "Because every time I tried to tell you, you treated it like a joke," I said. "You didn't listen." Silence sat down with us. 500 people became witnesses to a conversation that should have been simple years ago. Somewhere, a cup found a saucer with the softest ring. A server's hand trembled, then steadied. Amy, the maid of honor, looked at the tablecloth. Daniel opened his hands, palms up, like a man begging instructions from the sky. "I thought you were keeping busy," he said. "I thought I was protecting you from disappointment." He swallowed. "I was wrong." "I wasn't asking for protection," I said. "I was asking to be heard." I didn't raise my voice or list the nights I typed with the window cracked to let the numbers cool. My calm did the counting for me. Evelyn inclined her head, then moved aside so the air between Daniel and me was clear. Melissa's grip softened. Margaret slid into the empty chair at my other side and said nothing. People who had performed certainty learned to mime respect. "Mom," Daniel whispered, quieter now, "did I really just thank the wrong people?" The question was too big for the room. "You thanked some of the right people," I said. "And you left one out." He nodded, as if moving would call his balance home. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words hadn't earned their full weight yet. Apologies are like checks. They clear when the account exists. Behind us, the planner whispered half the room to a server who had only caught every other word. "Half," he repeated, eyes round as saucers, and set down a tray with reverence reserved for relics. The band looked grateful for the order to wait. The planner touched the band leader's sleeve. He shook his head. The ballroom wanted sound, but it didn't deserve a rescue. I let my hands rest on the linen, open, not clenched. The locket warmed. Patrick's tiny photograph pressed faith through metal. Across the room, a vice president from Harper Logistics started toward me, then stopped, as if realizing tonight wasn't the hour for new alliances. A younger employee lifted a glass toward me without bravado. Gratitude, not theater. I returned the gesture with a nod meant for every payroll I would meet on time. Daniel tried again. "What do I do now?" he asked, sounding younger than any tuxedo can dignify. I breathed once, counted, and kept my answer plain. "You start by listening," I said. "Then you practice. You practice until listening is the first thing you do." He stood as if to speak to the room. I shook my head once. Not yet. This wasn't his microphone any longer. It belonged to the truth, and the truth was still arranging its chairs. The hall accepted that choice. Conversations fell to a respectful murmur, and then to nothing at all. The chandeliers hummed. I kept my seat. I let the quiet crown the moment, the way justice wears plain clothes when it finally walks through the door and refuses to hurry. Daniel folded into the chair as if the floor had let go of him. His shoulders rounded, his head bowed. The tuxedo that had looked like armor now fit like borrowed cloth. The crowd gave us a ring of air. Forks settled. Phones stayed dark. I kept my hands on the linen and waited for the shaking in his breath to slow. "I do not know how to come back from this," he said, voice low enough to keep our small circle private. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was grown." I let the locket rest against my pulse and measured my answer. "You were protecting your reflection," I said. "You wanted the room to see you as generous, so you made me small. It worked until it did not." He nodded. Pain pushed his gaze to the tablecloth. "I worried you would make me look bad," he whispered. "I worried you would say the wrong thing. I worried you would embarrass me." I kept my tone even. "You worry about me making you lose face. I worry about losing myself." The sentence landed between us like a key placed gently on a desk. We have been living inside different fears. He pressed his palms to his eyes and breathed like a runner after a hill. "How long?" he asked. "Have I been missing you while standing next to you?" It was not a question I could answer with dates and balances. It belonged to the years when I smiled through condescension so the rent would clear for both of us. "I did not want to take your night," I said. "I wanted to teach you how to hold one." He looked up, eyes rimmed with the red of sudden understanding. "I made you carry me," he said. "Then I told the world you were heavy." A murmur from the nearest tables rose and fell. Apologies hovered without landing. I kept our focus small. "I will not list my hours," I said. "I am not a ledger for you to audit. I am your mother." He nodded again, slower, as if each inch required permission. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Say it, and I will do it." "Begin with listening," I said. "Let the part of you that sees me as inconvenient retire. Let a new part be hired in its place." He tried to smile. It broke. He let it go. "I am sorry," he said. This time the words carried weight. "I am sorry for shrinking you to fit my comfort." I set one hand over the other and let quiet complete the sentence. Around us, the room learned not to intrude. Daniel bowed his head and stayed there, not in theatrical guilt, but in a posture that finally recognized the ground he had been standing on all along. I did not touch his shoulder. I did not need to. The power had already moved. It settled where it belonged, not above him or above me, exactly between us now. Applause never returned. Something quieter did. People approached in twos and threes, each carrying a small parcel of remorse. A client from the logistics side bowed his head and said he had repeated a joke he did not invent. He asked if I would accept an apology he should have offered before the microphone changed hands. I thanked him without blessing him with ease. He left lighter. Amy, the maid of honor, came next, clutching her note cards like wilted flowers. Her voice trembled in a register I recognized from the library. She said she made a party out of what was sacred to someone else. I told her the roses looked lovely and to take care of Melissa. She nodded and folded the cards into a square no larger than a postage stamp. The man with the thrift store joke tried to smile and failed. He said his mother would have smacked him with a wooden spoon for the way he spoke. I said, Wooden spoons are for stirring and for teaching. He asked if I would like coffee. I told him yes, black, and let him serve without shaking. Margaret hovered at the edge of my table the way she did when we were girls, and she had broken a rule I obeyed. She said she had meant well. I said meaning well is a lamp with no cord. It glows only in memory. She touched my shoulder and let her hand fall. Evelyn crossed without hurry. She took my hand in both of hers, as if making a room out of skin and bone. She thanked me for saving her company. She thanked me for saving her daughter's day from becoming a monument to smallness. She did not flatter. She named the work. She named the cost. I told her truth given in public repairs, what pride breaks in private. We stood for one steady breath. Then she returned to her table and ordered water. Melissa reached me with mascara mapped across her cheeks. She said she was sorry for being brave about the wrong things. I said grief makes everyone clumsy. Weddings are loud. The heart mishears. She asked if I could hug her without making a scene. I did. The room softened its gaze and minded its own business. Daniel hovered behind her, eyes fixed on a point over my head. He said he could not look at me yet, not because he was angry, but because he was seeing too much at once. I told him he could take his time. That time is a tool, not a trap. He nodded, and I watched the nod travel through him like a tide moving furniture back where it belongs. Servers resumed their circuits. Coffee found cups. Cake slid into slices. The planner restarted the band. Couples swayed under light. A young employee from Harper Logistics brought my bag to the chair beside me and asked if I needed a ride later. I told her I would manage. Apologies kept coming, some elegant, some cluttered. I accepted what was offered. I did not audition anyone for penance. My hands rested open on the linen. The locket warmed. Patrick's photograph held its tiny piece. When the hour grew sensible, I stood and gathered my shawl. People stepped aside. I did not make a speech. I straightened my chair. I placed my glass where the ring already waited. I looked at Evelyn. She inclined her head. I looked at my son. He bowed his. I breathed. Then I said the words the night had earned. Tonight is enough. The morning after the wedding, my phone began its small insistence. Then Daniel's name filled the screen. Then home when he tried the landline. I let each call run to voicemail. I listened to the quiet between rings. It sounded like breath keeping its own time. I rinsed cups, folded a towel, set the silver locket on the windowsill where it held light like a hand. By afternoon, the calls settled into an hourly rhythm. Daniel's messages wavered between logistics and apology. He reported flight times, offered flowers, said he wanted to fix things and did not know where to start. I turned the phone face down and made soup. My hands know measurements by memory. Water, carrots, salt, a bay leaf, the small science of turning ordinary into supper. On the second day, Margaret arrived without a text, a habit that once felt like love and lately like a shortcut. She stood at my door with a grocery bouquet and a face that had forgotten which expression to wear. "I came to check on you," she said, stepping into the kitchen. She set the bouquet in the sink and frowned. We sat. She began to apologize the way some people pray, reciting right phrases while her mind consulted a clock. "I meant to protect you from disappointment," she said. "I thought I was being practical." I nodded. Practical is a coat that sometimes hides fear. "I did not recognize what you were building," she said. I spoke like a person who prefers lamps to sunlight. I poured tea. She cupped the mug as if warmth could rewrite a sentence. Will you forgive me? She asked. Forgiveness is a road, I said. I will start walking. We did not hug. Ceremony would have made the moment less honest. At the door, she touched my arm, then left with the bouquet. That night, the house settled into the hum I have known since widowhood. I sat at the table where numbers learned my name and pulled a sheet of stationery from the drawer. I dated the page and wrote the salutation the old way. Dear Daniel, you were 6 the first time I watched you on a stage. Your paper crown slid down your forehead and you sang anyway. After the program, I wiped punch from your lip and promised you could be brave without being loud. I believed it then. I still do. You have known my tired hands, but not my working voice. I kept the voice quiet so the world would not ask for more than we had. On nights when you slept, I learned the habits of money the way others learn constellations. By stepping outside and letting the cold teach clarity. I ran the numbers until they stopped running me. I did it because a boy needed shoes and a roof and a future that did not make him apologize for his mother. I did not tell you sooner because every time I tried, laughter arrived like a guest who overstayed. You were not cruel on purpose, but your comfort required me to be small. I chose usefulness over victory. That choice cost me a language I am now reclaiming. Here is what I want, not flowers, not a speech, listening that arrives first and stays to do the dishes. I want respect that remembers to call before deciding for me. Understand that I am your mother and also a person whose work is not a hobby. I love you. Love is why I will answer the phone when I am ready. Love is why I will not answer until then. Mom. I read the letter twice without changing a word. I folded it once and slipped it into an envelope without a stamp. I placed it in the drawer with batteries and measuring tape, the practical things that keep a home honest. The phone blinked again on the counter. Daniel's name, then silence. Outside, the streetlight drew a square on the floor. The house kept our quiet. I washed the soup pot, dried it well, let the kitchen grow still enough to hear the locket hinge click when I put it away for the night. 6 months later, the conference room of RC Holdings looked over the river. Glass to the ceiling, a long, dark table, chairs that did not squeak. I arrived early, as I always do. The silver locket sat where a tie would sit on someone else. I touched the hinge, opened my notebook, and read the agenda twice. Operations update, acquisitions pipeline, risk, community commitments. Numbers carry stories when you ask politely. Directors filtered in. Legal placed a folder by my water. Operations set down charts. We began, and I guided the meeting the way a librarian guides noise into learning. A question here. A pause there. A vote when silence had done its work. Quarterly figures held. A plant expansion waited on zoning. A supplier needed shorter terms. I approved them and ordered an audit of freight assumptions. The table listened. Respect found its chair. Midway through, Daniel arrived with the controller and a junior analyst. He took the far seat and waited for a nod. I gave it. He opened his laptop only when I invited financials from the new affiliate. Thank you, Miss Callahan, he said, the title cautious, but real. He presented cleanly, answered questions without performing charm, and looked to me to see if he had brought the right tools. You did fine, I said, and he breathed, sat back, and listened. After a short break, he asked to remain for a smaller session with operations. I agreed. When the door closed and the table shortened to 4, he spoke in a voice that understood limits. "I want to learn the parts I mocked," he said. "I am ready to be useful." I assigned him vendor aging for a region we had ignored, a plane map for a man learning to read weather beyond his window. "The numbers will not forgive you," I said. "They will teach you." He nodded. Legal returned with a community grant. We had promised new books and longer hours to a branch library that needed both. I signed in ink that did not smear, a quiet contract with the life that made me. The meeting adjourned. Chairs held their tongues. People stood without scraping. Daniel lingered. "Thank you, Miss Callahan," he said again. Then softer, "Mom." He gathered his papers and left with the analyst, pausing at the door to meet my eyes and hold them long enough for the past to nod at the present. I looked at the river. The city kept moving. Cranes, ferries, and sirens braided into a song that was neither triumph nor apology. Victory is not revenge. Victory is when I am no longer dismissed. The sentence lived in my chest like a bell that rings without being struck. I closed the notebook. I slipped the locket under my collar and felt Patrick's photo settle where it could keep counsel. In the lobby, the guard wished me a good afternoon by name. I passed a woman balancing a portfolio and a diaper bag. She smiled like someone building. I pressed the elevator button and gave her the floor. Power makes more sense when it remembers its manners. Outside, the air had early autumn clarity that sharpened edges without making them cut. I stepped through the revolving door and stood on the stone. Sunlight reached across the avenue and found the locket. The metal warmed. The tiny photograph caught a flare. For a second, it looked as if Patrick had winked at the sky. Then, "Before we say goodbye, I would love to know something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell us in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care. I will see you in the next story.